Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Plugging into the Future of EV Infrastructure, Opportunities for Economic Development Districts and Regional Organizations. I'm Brett Schwartz, an associate at the NADO Research Foundation. So I'm sure you all would agree that this is a really exciting time in our country as we work to establish a framework for the future with the new and emerging technologies around transportation, economic development, and energy. And that couldn't be more true than in the area of electric vehicle infrastructure. So that's why we're really happy to host today's webinar to bring together some of our federal partners to share more about what opportunities are available to you and your regions to best position them to benefit from current and upcoming investments and resources. So we'll be hearing from leadership and staff at the Economic Development Administration, the Department of Transportation, and the Department of Energy, who will discuss their agency's vision for how places can best leverage these EV opportunities in an effort to promote a more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable future. So we have a lot of great information to get to, and I want to move things along, but briefly want to mention a little bit about my organization, the National Association of Development Organizations, and the NADO Research Foundation. So NADO is a national membership association of regional planning commissions, councils of governments, and economic development districts all across the country that work on a variety of economic development and planning issues related to transportation, workforce, resilience, social services, and much more. Now, the vast majority of our members serve small metropolitan and rural regions where their expertise and technical assistance is really critical to small communities and rural places. Now, I work with the NADO Research Foundation, which is the nonprofit affiliate of NADO, which provides training and educational opportunities around a lot of these regional economic development issues that are so important to our members and other regional partners. So to learn more about our organization, please visit our new website at nado.org. So today's webinar is part of the Economic Development District Community of Practice, which is funded through the U.S. Economic Development Administration. So we launched this effort at the end of last year with the goal of building capacity across the national network of 400 economic development districts across the country through in-person and virtual trainings like today's, providing networking events, case studies, and best practices, and much more. So we're really excited about this brand new opportunity to learn more about what we have in store during this 5-year project. Please visit our website at nado.org/EDDCOP. So a big thank you to EDA for supporting this effort, and a big thank you to our first speaker today, who will be sharing a few brief remarks with us. And that's the Assistant Secretary of Commerce at USEDA, Alejandra Castillo. Assistant Secretary Castillo was sworn into her current role in August 2021 and has served in leadership positions for 3 presidents, Presidents Biden, Obama, and Clinton. Her professional career spans 2 decades, focusing on creating equitable opportunities for all Americans. And that's what we'll be hearing about much more today from the Assistant Secretary, how to meet this particular moment to harness the power of electric vehicle infrastructure to promote more inclusive economic and community development for all. So Assistant Secretary Castillo has been a wonderful partner to NADO, and we're really grateful for her support of economic development districts and regional organizations, and of course, very grateful for taking the time today to join us. So Assistant Secretary, I'll turn it over to you for some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Brett. And I want to not only thank you and thank NADO, but also thank the NADO Research Foundation for the excellent work that you do. And I'm glad that you mentioned the community of practice. It's very exciting. It's an opportunity for us to not only share best practices, but also learn from one another and make sure that we're supporting our economic development districts. So I want to also recognize the Federal Highway Administration of the Department of Transportation, the Department of Transportation's Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, as well as joint offices of from the Department of Energy, as well as others. I just want to give a couple of remarks. First of all, employing electric vehicle charging stations represents a tremendous opportunity for communities and regions across the country. I look forward to hearing about the exciting programs coming from the Department of Transportation and the Department of Energy, thanks to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that helps move these efforts along. Under President Biden's leadership, you can be assured that all of us in the federal government are committed to ensuring that this historic level of funding flowing into our communities to support these and other efforts are being done in an equitable manner. At the Economic Development Administration, we support a wide spectrum of local economic needs, from planning to infrastructure. We have redefined our investment priorities with an emphasis on equity, which provides the framework for all of our investments in communities and in the people we serve. We strongly believe that regional collaboration is essential for economic recovery because regions are the centers of competition in the new global economy, and those that work together to leverage resources and use their strengths to overcome weaknesses will fare better than those that do not. The Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or CEDS, contributes to effective economic development in America's communities and regions through a locally based, regionally driven economic development planning process. Economic development planning, as implemented through the CEDS, is not only a cornerstone of EDA's programs, but successfully serves as a means to engage community leaders, leverage the involvement of the private sector, and establish a strategic blueprint for regional collaboration. At EDA, we work closely with our EDDs, and I'm so happy that so many of you have decided to be part of this webinar. And we partner to fund the locally driven economic development strategies. While electric vehicle charging stations and other related infrastructures can serve as regional assets in support of economic development projects, they are not usually economic development engines unto themselves. They are one of those assets that evolve after or in conjunction with economic development in communities and can serve as a key source of economic activity. I encourage our communities to get plugged into your regional CEDS. We want to ensure that economic practitioners like yourselves not only begin to think about the long-term implications of EV infrastructure, but also have the tools, information, and resources to serve the minority, women, veteran, and small businesses within your communities who may need to be aware of how these efforts all come together. Through EDA's Communities of Practice, as you heard at the beginning of this conversation, we are committed to support your ongoing efforts and future requests for technical and capacity assistance, ensuring equitable and inclusive economic opportunities like this are reaching rural and disadvantaged communities. I want to thank you all once again for joining this webinar. I want to close by also thanking each and every one of you for your commitment to this work that you are all not only involved in, but I would even say you are truly the architects of the future. I'm going to end with an example as to places around the country that are truly making EV charging stations not only a tool to embrace the future, but also a tool to drive economic development. And I visited not too long ago, Los Angeles, which has a commitment to begin to place EV charging stations specifically in underserved communities. Once again, as you think about not just the future, but as you think about how do you architect how people make decisions, whether to go through a particular town or not, EV charging stations are going to be one of those elements where people are going to consider when making those decisions. So I'm excited. I've been very engaged in this conversation with the Department of Transportation, and I'm just delighted to be part of this webinar today. So I'm going to send it back to Brett, and thank you once again for inviting me this afternoon, I should say. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, Assistant Secretary Castillo, thank you so much for your remarks and your leadership and vision around these issues and really setting the tone for today's conversation. I really appreciate you bringing up the CEDS, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. This is an area at NADO and the NADO Research Foundation we've worked a lot on over the past few years. So happy to reach out and talk to folks more about the CEDS and how we can integrate some of these issues into the CEDS planning process going forward. So thanks again for your remarks and your leadership. And thanks to all of you again for joining us for today's webinar. I just want to run through some quick logistics here before we kick things off with our presentations. If you have questions or comments, please put them in the questions box, which you should see in a drop-down menu on the side of our screen. My colleague Jack Morgan is monitoring those, and we're going to get to as many of these questions as we can towards the end of the conversation. Probably the number one question we always get is this webinar being recorded? And absolutely it is. And we hope to have this posted at our website at nado.org by tomorrow. And then anyone who's registered for the event will also get an email with the recording and the slides as well. So lots of great information coming your way. Don't feel you need to write it all down. We'll be getting this information to you by tomorrow at the latest. There'll also be a quick post-webinar survey that pops up at the end of the screen. Please take a minute or two to fill that out. It really helps us with our programming. We want to make sure we're responsive to your needs and interests and goals. So please fill out that quick survey at the end. And of course, be in touch with me anytime around this issue or anything else related to your economic development and regional planning efforts. We at the NADO Research Foundation are here to support you on that journey. So with that, just want to briefly introduce our presenters, and then we're going to turn things over. But you, of course, just heard from the Assistant Secretary with her opening remarks. And after my quick introduction here, we're going to turn things over to Suraiya Motsinger, who is an environmental protection specialist at the Federal Highway Administration. She'll be talking about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and more specifically, what's in the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or NEVI, which is an acronym you'll be hearing a lot about today. After Suraiya, you'll be hearing from Leo San Roman, who is a manager with the Procurement Assistance Division at the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization at DOT. Leo will be talking more about his office's mission, the resources, and some investments that are available. So looking forward to that presentation. And then following Leo, we'll be hearing from Monisha Shah, who is the Equity Lead at the Joint Office on Energy and Transportation. And Monisha will be talking more about efforts to incorporate equity and Justice 40 goals into these larger EV infrastructure investments. So as I mentioned, lots of great information coming your way, and I don't want to take up any more time with these intros, but we've got a great panel ahead. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Suraiya to kick things off. So Suraiya, thanks so much again for being here.
Thanks, Brett, and thanks everyone for having me here. Federal Highways is very happy to be here presenting on the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program. So next slide, please. And as a little disclaimer, I want to mention that, oops, we can go ahead and pop to the next slide. Thanks. Oops, one back. I might have just a little delay on my screen. Thank you. Except for the statutes and regulations that I'm particularly citing, everything in the presentation today is purely informational, and I may slip up and make a little mistake in my speech. Please note that only the statutes and regulations are binding for states. Next slide, please. And yes, we're very excited that the language in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill, allows for this completely transformative investment in EV charging infrastructure. And this Bipartisan Infrastructure Law was passed just November of 2021, and we're excited that it includes the NEVI formula program. Next slide, please. In fact, bill includes $7.5 billion worth of funding for electric vehicles and alternative fuels. And this includes the $5 billion NEVI formula program, which it provides dedicated funding to states to strategically deploy EV charging infrastructure to establish an interconnected national network for EV charging, and to also facilitate data collection, access, and reliability. The NEVI formula program also, in addition to providing this funding for states to install the EV infrastructure, also has a $300 million set aside to create a new office, a joint office of energy and transportation, to provide additional technical assistance on really the detailed energy specific requirements related to EV charging. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law also includes a $2.5 billion grants for charging and alternative fueling infrastructure program. This will be released as a discretionary program, but a NOFO has yet to be released. So you'll have to stay tuned for further information on that. And we won't discuss it too much more in our presentation today. Next slide, please. So what's the purpose of the NEVI formula program? The purpose of the program is to provide a national network for EV charging that ensures that wherever you travel across the United States, you can find a EV charging opportunity that is convenient, affordable, reliable, and equitable. All aspects of the NEVI formula program are meant to really provide for this CARE program. Next slide, please. And FHWA is distributing this formula funding on a formula basis to state DOTs, the District of Columbia DOT, and Puerto Rico DOT. So we often get a lot of questions if the private sector can have direct access from the federal government to this NEVI formula program. And the answer is no. The funding is being provided directly to the state DOTs. Now, several of the state DOTs, in fact, I venture to say most of them, are working in close coordination with local communities, the private sector, nonprofits to ensure deployment of EV infrastructure using NEVI formula funds is done in a way that includes partnership with all these groups. So there still is a great opportunity to get involved and to utilize NEVI formula program funding, but you do have to contact and work closely with your state DOT to identify the best opportunities to utilize NEVI formula funding in your particular area. And this funding was made available upon the approval of all the state DOT's EV infrastructure deployment plans. And I'll speak to that in just a second. Next slide, please. So the NEVI formula program required the development of state plans to identify how states would utilize this funding in order to establish EV charging infrastructure. And the first ever set of plans were due just this past fall, with all 52 state plans being submitted on time by August 1st, 2022, and all plans approved by October 1st, 2022. All of the plans are available on our website that you can see right there. You might want to take a screenshot in case you'd like to see your particular state plan. And I'll also have it at the end of my presentation. Thank you. Now, the state plans themselves, we provided a template for all of the information that would be contained within state plans, and you can see it's quite a bit of information. So these are really rich documents that can give you a lot of information about what the states are planning to do with their initial funds and can give you insight into what they're planning to do with funding for future years as well. Next slide, please. So it's important to note that NEVI formula program funding has to be used only for projects that are directly related to EV charging infrastructure. Within that, we actually have quite broad applicability for the eligibility of these funds. You can use the funds to acquire, install, to purchase, and install EV charging infrastructure. Also, unusual for federal highway funding, you can use NEVI formula program funds to offset operations and maintenance costs as well. And you can use it for planning, data analysis, really anything that is directly related to EV charging infrastructure and establishing the program. It is very important to note, as states will look to work with the private sector and other non-traditional recipients of federal funds, that all applicable requirements under Title 23 of USC and 2 CFR Part 200 apply to the administration of these funds. And what that really means is that we have really specific processes and procedures and requirements for documentation for any federal funds. State DOTs are very, very well versed in these requirements, so they will be good partners in working to implement NEVI formula program funds. But it's important to note that there are specific requirements that must be met. Next slide, please. So in terms of establishing a national vision for what this national EV charging network will look like, what we see and what we're requiring through formula program guidance is that at each charging station, at least 4 DC fast charging ports be available. And that means there are 4 individual slots to come park your car and charge simultaneously. And that must constitute a charging station. Also, we have a power requirement there, that these are really fast chargers that are being installed using NEVI formula program funds. Each charger has to provide, at the request of the car, a minimum of 150 kilowatts each simultaneously at the site. And additionally, we have a vision for how frequent these chargers have to be placed along the national network to ensure that it's really convenient. And if you're driving a long distance, you can rest assured you should be able to find a charger relatively soon. And that spacing that we've established is 50 miles along the national network. And of course, these chargers aren't actually directly on the highway infrastructure itself. They're along the corridor off of an exit. So we've established that they have to be within 1 mile along those corridors. Next slide, please. And along with those very basic requirements describing what we see for a national charging network, FHWA has also published a proposed rule, which is we're in an active rulemaking right now, so it very well may be finalized very soon. But we've established a proposed regulation for a set of minimum standards and criteria that are much more detailed and technical, describing what we're expecting to see at each charging station. And this will really help in the implementation of the NEVI formula program, because when states go out to do their solicitations and to hire contractors to install these charging stations, they'll know exactly what to ask for and what to hold contractors to ensure that we're establishing charging stations that look the same across the country, making it really convenient for you when you're traveling a long distance. Next slide, please. And I've referred to a couple times these corridors. Well, we actually require that initially, at least with the NEVI formula program funds, that the charging stations be installed along a set of designated alternative fuel corridors. These are corridors that states have designated along with the federal government over the course of the past 6 years, and identified them as important corridors for EV charging and alternative fueling. So, and here's a little snapshot of the latest set of alternative fuel corridors. So this is the initial place where the NEVI charging stations will be. Next slide, please. And finally, in terms of technical assistance, there's a lot of available technical assistance for this program. It is entirely new for all of us across the country. It's new, of course, through Bill, but it's really innovative. It's the first ever EV charging formula program that we've had. So that's why we have the joint office that has amazing experts at the Department of Energy that support us and support the entire country in terms of technical assistance there. We also have our FHWA division offices at each state and the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico that can assist in terms of interpretation of any Title 23 requirements, eligibility program requirements, anything that comes out of our office at FHWA. And of course, we have published on our website the NEVI formula program guidance itself, along with FAQs. And finally, last slide, I wanted to leave you, and this may be a screenshot, with some of our useful web pages and web links. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Leo Samroman with the Office of the Secretary. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Suraiya, for your presentation. I appreciate your time today, and I want to thank Brett, his team, and the NADO organization for helping us and collaboration put this event together. And special thanks to Alejandra Castillo, Assistant Secretary of Commerce for EDA. Thanks for your leadership and supporting the small business community and this initiative. My name is Leonardo San Roman, and I'm the manager of the Procurement Assistance Division in DOT's Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. So I'm going to provide a high-level overview of our office, what we do in support of the small business and support the small business community and the small disadvantaged businesses as well. So next slide, please. So the OSDBU missions, the OSDBUs were created in 1978 by an amendment to the Small Business Act. And there's an office, there's an OSDBU office on each of the 24 CFO agencies. So you can find an OSDBU office on each level of the federal agency. And our main role is to support small business utilization at the agency level and to ensure that small businesses have an opportunity to compete and perform in federal contract opportunities. Okay. For the department, we ensure that the policies and the goals of the Secretary of Transportation are met and implemented in a fair and efficient manner. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick snapshot of our organization. The OSDBU director coordinates with DOT operating administrations and acquisition community in implementation of Small Business Act requirements. The OSDBU director is one of the few federal directors that are appointed by the president. Unfortunately, right now we have a vacancy. Our OSDBU director, Shelby Scales, left a few weeks ago. I'm in the acting role right now, helping to keep the office running and moving forward with all the initiatives that she left. So the OSDBU director supports the secretary's initiatives, especially now with the equity, all the equity activities the secretary is trying to implement, and also it is at the top of the secretary's priorities, wealth creation. So our director is the co-lead in the Equity Justice Working Group within the Equity Task Force in the department. So the main role for that working group is to ensure equitable practices throughout DOT procurement processes. Within the OSDBU, we have two divisions, Procurement Assistance Division and Regional Assistance Division. I am the manager of the PAD. So our role is to ensure small businesses compete for contract opportunities with within DOT. I work very closely with the Small Business Administration to negotiate the small business goals every year. We also provide technical assistance and access to contract opportunities to small businesses. We maintain the DOT procurement forecast in real time. Right now, we're making some changes to it. We also provide oversight to all DOT operating administrations to ensure the department meets its small business goals every year. So we sit in many of the DOT acquisition boards to ensure small businesses have a voice in all DOT procurement opportunities. The RAD division, the Regional Division, provides oversight and management to our small business transportation research centers, which is we have cooperative agreements with 11 trade associations nationwide to provide technical assistance, capacity building, including access to capital activities to small businesses, disadvantaged business enterprises, and other small businesses to ensure they are ready and stay ready to compete for contract opportunities. Next slide, please. So the PAD, we do a one-on-one consultation with small businesses. We meet regularly with small businesses to help them navigate the DOT procurement process. Also, we assist in the OSDBU directing the implementation of the Small Business Act. We are the leading division to in terms of the our SDBU outreach efforts. So we do monthly sessions through our Connections Marketplace, which is a new program that we launched last year. And we also do we used to do a lot of in-person sessions at the department to provide an opportunity to small businesses to hear about the departmental procurement opportunities moving forward and the DOT procurement process. We manage the mentor project program for the department. And as I mentioned before, we have the connection. We manage the Connections Marketplace. The Regional Assistance Division manages the SBTRCs. These SBTRCs are located in 11 states nationwide, and they work very closely with state DOTs and local transportation agencies to ensure small businesses are aware of upcoming opportunities. They have the bonding capacity they need to compete for those contracts. If they're in need for financial assistance, our SBTRC also help small businesses to get the financing they need. So we also have the WIDI program, which is it's an internship program that we partner up with prime contractors and state DOTs to provide an opportunity to women and girls to participate in 8 to 10 week internship opportunities. We have had this program for more than 10 years. We graduated more than 125 girls under this program. It's very successful. We're looking forward to expand it in next year. And we also provide support to the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. As you know, the DB program is applicable only to Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration, and Federal Aviation Administration. So this program has goals set at the grantee level and project-specific goals as well. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this is an overview. This is a map of all of our SBTRCs that we have nationwide. They provide comprehensive training and technical assistance to small businesses in the region. Right now, we are working with all of them as part of our bill implementation to do regional summits, working with state DOTs, prime contractors, technical assistance providers, and other federal partners to ensure that small businesses are aware of the bill opportunities that are coming up, including the EV charging station opportunities that are coming up as well. And then we also engage with transportation-related contract and bill funded projects that fostering key relationships with prime contractors and stakeholders. Next slide, please. SBTRC programs, a bonding education program is an 8-week comprehensive program that we work with small businesses in the construction industry. This is an 8-week going from A to C to help small businesses understand how to get bonded or how to increase their bonding capacity. This has been in place for more than 12 years. It's been one of our most successful programs. In the last 3 or 4 years, program participants have been able to secure more than $200 million in new bonding levels. So we are trying to expand this program moving forward. Hopefully we get more funding to increase our technical assistance and our events nationwide. Capital Access Program, we signed an MOU with the Small Business Administration last September to work on a pilot program for the Small Business Investment Corporation program. So this MOU and these activities will help small businesses that are looking for alternative sources of funding to scale up their businesses. Some businesses, we found out that they don't want to get a line of credit. They don't want to get a loan. They would like to find a partner that would like to invest in their firms. So this program is going to help them connect with the investors that can help them scale up provide the funding to scale up their businesses. As I mentioned before, the regional summits, we already held 3 sessions last year. Our first one was May 2022 with the West Central SBTRC, and we plan to host at least one more symposium or summit every month the next year. Our next session is going to be on February 22nd in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And the next after that one is going to be on March 8th in Dallas, Texas. So these sessions will provide an opportunity to small businesses to hear about the bill funding, what opportunities are coming up, for them to connect with state DOTs, local agencies as well. We are going to bring up some of the SBA programs to help small businesses increase their bonding capacity. We also are trying to connect small businesses with and MBEs with prime contractors during our one-on-one business matchmaking sessions. We plan to connect contracting officers from state DOTs and federal agencies with small businesses that are ready to perform for those opportunities. This is a new platform that we acquired last year, and we match small businesses with contracting officers depending on the specific need code. So it's been we've been using that for a few months already. Looking forward to expand the use of this platform in the next months throughout the regional summits. And of course, we on the EV charging station space, we want to make sure that small businesses get a better understanding of the funding that is coming up, connect the state DOTs on these opportunities moving forward. Next slide, please. So DOT by the numbers. So the Department of Transportation in last year, our total spend was 8.4 billion. And this is the contracts that were awarded by DOT Operating Administration, direct contracts. Okay, this is not applicable to the financial assistance programs that we provide to the state DOTs. From the 8.4 billion, 2.7 billion went to small businesses, 1.79 billion went to SDBs. We achieved 21.25%. And also $665 million were awarded to women-owned small businesses, and a little bit over $327 million were awarded to SDVOSB and Hobson firms as well. So the Department of Transportation, we also had like more than 30,000 contact actions last year. And from all the DOT operating administrations, Federal Aviation Administration is the largest of all the OAs. So they procure approximately $4.5 billion a year, which is close to 70 to 75% of the DOT total spend. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of one of the operating administrations, FAA. That's the top 5 need codes that they procure. They're procuring in 2022. In FY22 also, the small business achievement was 29.70. As I mentioned before, FAA is the largest of all DOT operating administrations, so we pay close attention on how they are spending their funds throughout the year. We have oversight on how they spend their money to make sure that they help the department to meet our goals. Next slide, please. Federal Highway Administration is the second largest with close to $1.2 billion in awards in FY 2022. They do a lot of highway construction projects in collaboration with the Federal Lands Highway Division. FHWA does very well in small business participation, and last year they did 46.39, which is low to what they normally do every year. They are above 50 to 55% on small business participation. However, last year they had several large contracts that were awarded to large businesses. Unfortunately, over the $50 million mark, it's very hard to find small businesses in highway construction that have the bonding capacity to do those type of services. For example, this year, like 2 weeks ago, there was a contract awarded by FHWA to support the Yellowstone National Park rehabilitation. And that contract was for $118 million. So we tried the best we could to find small businesses. However, it was very hard to try to find those. Next slide, please. So next slide. These are the investments that are coming to the department as part of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the bill. And this is just a very high level amount of what the money is coming over to the department. We are going to get over $500 billion in the next, well, from the moment that the law was enacted last year. $110 billion is going to be for highway, for road, bridges, and major projects. For transportation safety, we are going to get 11 billion. You heard before from Suraiya about the electric vehicles and buses funding. We're gonna get at the department, we're gonna get $15 billion for airports, ports and waterways, $42 billion. On this one, the Federal Aviation Administration has a major component here that they're going to do. They're gonna get $5 billion in the next 5 years for air traffic control, air traffic facilities repairs in the next 5 years. So we're working very hard and closely with FAA to ensure small businesses have an opportunity and understanding on what's the funding that is coming up in the pipeline for them, help them to compete. And then environmental remediation and power infrastructure, $86 billion. Next slide, please. And this is a slide that this is my last slide before I turn it over to Monisha. We always like people to understand how DOT operates from a budget standpoint. We get two pockets of money. So one of them is for direct contract that I mentioned to you before, that we procured over $8 billion in fiscal year 2022. On direct contracts, these contracts are awarded by DOT operating administrations, and that they follow the federal acquisition regulations, and FAA, which is they don't follow the FAR. They maintain their own acquisition management system. Back in the early 90s, Congress authorized FAA to be out of the FAR, and they're not subject to the Small Business Act as well. However, they help DOT to meet our small business goals. And then we have the small business goals that are negotiated with SBA every year. For FY23, we are at 33.41%. And on the SCB side, we are at 21% goal for small disadvantaged business, and all the other socioeconomic categories, they don't change. They're territory by nature. The SDB, OSB, and women-owned small business and Hobson goals that don't change. On the grant side, this is the funding that we provide to state DOTs, transit authorities, and airports for projects nationwide. For these projects, agencies follow state and local acquisition regulations, and we always advise to small businesses to ensure they understand these rules. They have to be abided for if they're trying to do business at the state level. And then on the grant side, there's a disadvantaged business enterprise goal. That is an aspirational goal of 10% that Congress mandates to the department, that from all the funds that we provide to the state DOTs, 10% has to be should be awarded to disadvantaged business enterprises. So DOT operating administrations in the DB program work with state DOTs to negotiate those goals, but keeping the baseline of 10% that we have to meet every year. So this is all I have at this point. I'm happy to answer any questions during the Q&A session. I'm gonna turn it over now to Monisha Shaw from the DOE DOT Joint Office. Monisha.
Thanks, Leo. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to present today. My name is Monisha Shaw, and I'm the equity lead at the brand new Joint Office on Energy and Transportation. You can go to the next slide. So as Suraiya mentioned, the Joint Office was established through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It's a new office, a new federal office, and our We are putting together the expertise from the Department of Transportation and Department of Energy to come together to help provide technical assistance to different federal agencies as well as funding recipients on implementing these new clean transportation infrastructure programs. So the vision of the Joint Office is a future where everyone can ride and drive electric. Next slide. Some of the programs that we are helping to provide technical assistance on is the NEVI program, which we're speaking about today. Suraiya also mentioned that just impending any moment now is a discretionary grant program, a competitive grant program that will focus on corridor and community charging. We also work with the Federal Transit Administration in their low-no emissions grants program and also the Clean School Bus program. And these are all historic levels of funding in clean transportation infrastructure efforts, and a very important time for us to be focusing on equitable outcomes for these new programs. Next slide. Similar, building off of what Suraiya also mentioned, last year was definitely a whirlwind. With our partnership with the Federal Highway Administration, program guidance was issued for the NEVI program in February. The Joint Office, in concert with the Federal Highway Administration, provided technical assistance to state departments of transportation in preparing their plans. Plans were due August 1st, and then all 52 of the plans were certified by October 1st. I think Suraiya put the link in the chat for where you can find those plans on the FHWA website. We also have a website for the Joint Office called driveelectric.gov, and you can also find those plans there. And so based on the plan, we really encourage you to go out and read those plans. There's a lot of really important information laid out in the plans about how your state is planning to build out their highway corridor charging infrastructure. And this will be the basis for how they move forward. Next slide. So the piece that I really wanted to focus on today is that DOT, DOE, and the Joint Office have been encouraging funding recipients from all these different programs to ensure equitable outcomes of the programs and also implement Justice 40, which I'll speak more about in a moment. So one aspect of this is to identify, prioritize, and measure benefits for disadvantaged communities from these EV charging infrastructure investments. To utilize the EV Charging Justice 40 map to help identify local disadvantaged communities, create and implement meaningful community engagement processes that inform decision-making and program implementation, and develop a diverse electric vehicle supply equipment workforce and contracting opportunities for small and disadvantaged businesses, and then also ensure compliance with civil rights laws, including Title VI, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and Section 504, to ensure that all Americans can access this new clean transportation infrastructure that we're building out together. The Justice 40 initiative is a very important initiative that was stood up by the Biden-Harris administration only 6 days into the administration. It just passed its 2-year mark. The idea is that 40% of the benefits of these investments should be received by disadvantaged communities. Go to the next slide then. And so what do we mean by benefits? Benefits can be, wide-ranging, and these are just some examples. And we're really encouraging states in their implementation of NEVI to explore all different types of benefits. So there's economic benefits, which we're really focusing on today for small and disadvantaged businesses, reducing transportation cost burden for households, especially for those households where transportation costs are really high, reducing emissions, there's a potential for jobs and job training, increasing the ability for communities to be a part of their energy and clean transportation transitions and decision-making power in that process, energy resilience benefits, and also access to clean transportation. And these are just examples, but there's so many more that could also be brought to bear for disadvantaged and underserved communities. Next slide. So one particular example is the workforce and economic opportunity considerations. The NEVI program, in addition to the other bill programs, are an opportunity for good paying jobs. with built-in training opportunities for new generation of trade workers, especially through apprenticeship requirements. We'd like to see broader participation from underrepresented groups, such as Black, Latino, Asian American, Pacific Islander, Indigenous, and women also in the workforce. There's geographic, economic, and other hiring preferences that can be used to target hiring from economically disadvantaged communities or groups of workers. And also, a real opportunity to bring jobs to underserved and disadvantaged communities through these programs. Next slide. So another piece is that although the disadvantaged business program that Leo spoke about is not applicable to the NEVI program, this basically just means that state DOTs can't set goals for DBE, but that doesn't mean that state DOTs can't contract with disadvantaged business enterprises. And we definitely want to encourage participation of small and disadvantaged businesses and DBEs in the NEVI program delivery, and also that the funding and contracting can be paired with other relevant programs. We'll go to the next slide. So in order to help states and local governments to help implement these programs, we developed a disadvantaged communities map, which combines the disadvantaged communities definitions from Department of Energy and Department of Transportation. And this map can be found at the link at the bottom of the page, and also from the driveelectric.gov website. Essentially looks at different types of disadvantage which are listed underneath the map, and also you can see here the alternative fuel corridors are in brown, overlaying the disadvantaged communities that Suraiya mentioned earlier. So this is an opportunity, and many states in their plans utilize this map as a starting point, and then we encourage them to also supplement with local information in terms of identifying communities to be working with. Next slide. So I won't go through and read everything here, but we really believe strongly in having a meaningful community engagement process throughout the entire program delivery of NEVI. NEVI is a 5-year program, and with the period of performance of the funding, could be longer than 5 years. And so it's important to identify the communities in your states and locally that you'd really like to be engaging with on designing the program, providing them education and information about this new transportation revolution, receiving input from them on their priorities and concerns, publicly summarizing that back to communities and incorporating that into program design decisions, and then validating that benefits have been received and updating program design to course correct, if there are opportunities to maximize benefits for communities. Next slide. So another important component of the NEVI program is engaging tribes and creating opportunities for tribes to participate in the electric vehicle infrastructure build out. So the Joint Office, in concert with Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, and the White House, have undertaken a number of efforts to engage tribes, including a tribal resources website and the launch of a National Electric Vehicle Initiative for tribal nations. More information on all these efforts can be found on the driveelectric.gov website. Next slide. So just to build on what Suraiya was saying is that there are a number of different project eligibility categories for which NEVI funds can be spent on. There's a number of activities that are very germane to ensuring equitable outcomes, including funding can be spent on community engagement, outreach, and participation. Funding can be spent on data sharing and data and mapping and analysis activities, including identifying disadvantaged communities locally and access to chargers for communities. We can also spend money from NEVI on workforce development activities, which is, I think, maybe a new feature for federal highways funding. And there's a number of pilots underway on this front, and technical assistance and guidance documents on how to leverage federal highway funding for workforce development activities. And then lastly, funding can also be spent to upgrade existing stations to meet the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements to ensure that all Americans can access these chargers. Next slide. So looking ahead, just kind of wrapping up what Suraiya was mentioning, and also the work that Leo mentioned, there's still a lot to be done, and a lot of work that we will collectively be working on. One is, we went through the plan cycle last year, and there will be, another cycle to undertake on providing technical assistance to state DOTs and preparing them to prepare their next set of plans for the NEVI program. As Suraiya mentioned, the discretionary charging and fueling infrastructure grant will be coming out soon, and then also a final rule on the minimum standards will also be coming out fairly shortly. The next slide. So the last thing I'll just mention is we do have a driveelectric.gov website where many of these resources and the information that we talked about today can be found. It's also a place where if you have more general questions that you can go and ask those questions, and they will be funneled to the Joint Office or DOT or DOE. And then also the Joint Office is hiring, and we're looking for really bright minds to join us to help us implement these programs and provide technical assistance. And so the driveelectric.gov website is another place to find out more information about that. So I think with that, I'll turn it back to Brett.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Manisha and Suraiya and Leo. And Assistant Secretary Castillo. I invite everybody to turn their webcams on again and join me up here on the virtual stage. We've got about 2 minutes left here. Maybe we can push a few minutes beyond if you're able to for some Q&A, but huge thanks to all of you for your presentations and for the work you're doing. It's just really inspiring to see the kind of whole of government approach and the collaborations that you all have to make this happen. So got just a few minutes left here on the clock, and maybe we can do kind of a lightning round of Q&A and just try to consolidate some of the questions that have come through. But I think one of the most common questions we've seen is kind of a variation on the theme of, we serve a remote rural location. Our state has not prioritized our area for EV. What options do we have? As well as, can the state plan be updated or amended, or are there ways to kind of, as the conversation is continuing? So any kind of thoughts and reflections on kind of the current state of NEVI and how communities can get more involved? That's open to anyone.
Sure, I'll go ahead and
Yeah.
jump in real quick, and
Yeah.
I'm sure others can chime in as well. But we actually require that the state plans be updated every year. So there's a great opportunity for you to reach out to your state. Definitely, go to our website or driveelectric.gov to find your state's EV infrastructure deployment plan for fiscal year 22 and 23. And you can see what they've already planned with the first 2 years of funding, but there's a great opportunity for you to get involved, contact your state DOT. Most of them have established websites particularly dedicated to EV charging, so you can go there to see how you can get involved particular to your state. And maybe your input can influence the FY24 plans that will be due this fall.
And the other thing I'd mention is that, I think the discretionary grant, and Suraiya, you should correct me if I'm wrong, does emphasize providing access to rural communities. So keep an eye out for that once it comes out. The other thing that I'll mention is that we still haven't defined what fully built out means, but there might be the potential to also have some flexibility once that definition is released for the NEVI program.
Great, thanks, Manisha and Suraiya. Yeah, another couple questions came through around this theme, around kind of connecting this effort to kind of local economic and community development efforts, and just questions about, have there been discussions around encouraging EV charging stations to be placed where there's amenities like, small parks, small businesses, where they're located, to kind of capture some of that visitor spending, tie into a tourism plan. So, and anything you can speak to around kind of actually that location element to that, how this can support communities large and small.
We're looking at each other trying to see who wants to jump in. I'll go ahead. Yes, we do encourage EV chargers to be located in places where there are other amenities, and we definitely heard this quite a bit with The proposed rulemaking, we received several comments that recommended that EV chargers be located where there are restrooms or maybe at trailheads, places that people can go and do something while they're waiting for their cars to be charged. At this point, we don't have anything in regulation that requires that, but again, as I mentioned and Monisha mentioned, we are in an active rulemaking, so keep an eye out for regulations that may be forthcoming on that. But at this point, we very much encourage it.
Thanks, Suraiya. And just one more question here before I want to give all of you a chance to say some final remarks. And Monisha, you did touch on this towards the end of your presentation, but a question about engaging with tribal nations. Should tribes reach out to their state DOTs or directly to DOT around this? What's kind of the communication channels for tribes trying to participate?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, you know, again, definitely encourage folks to look at the state plans and what your state has been putting forward in terms of how they'd like to move forward on implementing the NEVI program. And we are trying to provide some tribal engagement support from the joint office and still figuring out what that's exactly going to look like. But yeah, I think the first step really is to take a look at the plan and then get in touch with the state DOT and try to form, you know, a closer relationship or bond on that front. And then take a look at driveelectric.gov and some of the tribal resources that we've posted there. And we do have, again, as I mentioned, sort of a comment box or ask questions box. So if there's like more specific information or support that folks are looking for, you know, that's a great place to provide, put those questions in, and then we can try to help support that more specifically.
Great, thank you so much. So we're pushing into overtime here. So I want to give each of you maybe 10, 15 seconds for any kind of closing thoughts or reflections and kind of what's next. So Leo, I'll turn it to you.
All right, thank you, Brett, and thank you, Monisha and Suraiya, for your presentations as well. I just want to echo what Suraiya and Monisha mentioned about how the department is trying to work very closely with rural communities and underserved communities and also tribal nations as well. In the next months and the next couple of months, we're going to be working very closely with the joint office and FHWA in some activities to make sure that the rural communities and tribes are aware of all of these funding opportunities that are coming up. We are trying to do the first ever EV charging station matchmaking event. This is we're trying to match contracting officers and small businesses in that industry to make sure that there were these opportunities that are coming up. But I'm very excited about this opportunity. And again, I want to thank you, Brett and Alejandra Castillo for her leadership on this. I would like to turn it over to Suraiya.
Thanks, Leo. Yes, we're so excited that, you know, all the interest that we've received on EV charging infrastructure, and really on our end, we're first of all so grateful that the joint office exists because they've stepped up and been doing so much outreach and technical assistance. But it's been almost an overwhelming response in terms of folks that are interested in EV charging. So, which is great. That is to say, too, though, that you know, you'll hear us say a lot, this is a new program, we're all figuring it out together. We really are. So by all means, you've heard us say it before, but get in touch with your state DOT, keep in touch. The program continues to evolve, and it's really an opportunity to evolve with you and with your influence, and we really need you at the table. So thanks so much for having an interest, and stay involved. Turn it over to Monisha.
Oh, thanks, Suraiya and Leo. And Brett, thanks again for giving us the opportunity to talk to this audience. Yeah, I'll just echo what Suraiya said. I would just say get involved. We need your help. Like, this is all hands on deck kind of effort. We're here to kind of just facilitate the conversations, honestly, and learn from all of you. Like, what are the things that you need? Join office trying to put together technical assistance to respond to those needs, and then also facilitate, you know, peer-to-peer exchange between folks so you can speak to each other in your own languages about how we're going to get this program implemented and, you know, basically be able to drive and ride electric across the country.
Excellent. Well,
Brett,
thank
I
you.
just want to say one last thing, Brett,
Please.
if you don't mind. Sorry, to the group. This is the first of many conversations we plan to have in the next couple of months. I know Brett wants to enhance this conversation moving forward. So stay tuned for upcoming sessions that we plan to have. Probably it's going to be in person in Washington D.C. with some of the meetings that are happening in the next couple of months, or we can do it visually as well. So I just wanted to remind the group about that. But thank you, Brett, for the opportunity again.
Absolutely. Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. We're just getting started here, and it's so many exciting opportunities. We reached out to our membership around this topic before the new year, and there was just tremendous enthusiasm. A lot of questions, as you can imagine, but a lot of energy and excitement, and we're really excited to partner with all of you. So thanks so much to the three of you, and of course the Assistant Secretary. I couldn't have asked for a better panel today to share this information. So keep an eye out for an email tomorrow with a link to the recording, the slides, and all those hyperlinks, and we'll of course post that on our website as well. So we'll leave it at that. We're just getting started. Thanks again, and best of luck to everyone as we're kind of moving forward with this new era of transportation. So have a great rest of the day. Be well, and we'll sign off for now. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks.
Thank you.